I want you to picture a desk. Nothing fancy. A utility planner's desk. Somewhere in the middle of the country with fluorescent lights, lukewarm coffee, the usual. And on that desk is a single application. One customer, one site, and that customer is asking for 300 megawatts of power. 300 megawatts. Let me put that in human terms. That is roughly the electricity you'd need to run a small city. One customer walking up to the window, asking for as much power as 150,000 homes. And they'd like it by the end of the decade, please. Now, a generation ago, that request would have been laughed out of the building. It would have been a typo. Somebody fat-fingered a spreadsheet. Today, that's a Tuesday. That application has a dozen cousins sitting in the same queue, and that planner staring at it has maybe 5 years and a transformer with an 18-month lead time to figure out how to say yes, or whether they even can. How did we get here? How did electricity, the most boring, taken for granted thing in your life, the thing you only think about when the lights go out, how did it become the single most important variable in whether a billion-dollar project lands in your community or somebody else's? To answer that, we are not going to start in a data center. We're going to start in 1890s Chicago with a relentless workaholic Englishman who invented the modern electricity customer and then died in disgrace for it. This is Site Selectors Are People too. I'm your host, as always, Devin Hillsdon-Smith. Let's get to work. Hey folks, welcome back. If you were with us for the Architects of Prosperity series, that 10-part odyssey where we went from Colbert and the Hall of Mirrors all the way through Marx and Bismarck and the 2024 Nobel Prize, first of all, thank you. That was a beast to make, and you stuck with it. And you might remember episode 3 of that series. We called it The Price of Innovation. That episode was about money. It was about John Law and the Mississippi Bubble and the South Sea Company and the world's first too-big-to-fail bailout. The whole point of that episode was that every great leap forward needs fuel. And in the 18th century, the fuel was financial liquidity, paper money, credit, the willingness to gamble. Well, this is part 2. Same title, on purpose. Because the lesson hasn't changed one bit. It's just the fuel changed. In 1720, the scarce, dangerous, world-shaping resource was capital. In 2026, it's electrons. Literal electricity. And I would argue that for those of us in economic development and site selection, the politics of the electron is about to become the most important thing we tackle. So if that part 3 was the price of innovation paid in money, this is the price of innovation paid in megawatts. Okay, let's meet our guy. His name was Samuel Insull. And here's the line I want you to hang on to for the whole episode because everything comes back to it. Samuel Insull built his entire career on the bet that human demand for electricity was infinite and that the only real constraint was capacity. For about 100 years, he was wrong. And then in roughly 2024, he became completely, terrifyingly right. But, of course, he didn't live to see it. So who was he? Insull was born in London in 1859. Working class kid, sharp as a tack, becomes a stenographer, which back then meant you were the human recording device in the room. And in 1881, 21 years old, he gets the job of a lifetime. He sails to America to become the private secretary of Thomas Edison. Yes, the Thomas Edison. Insull becomes Edison's right hand, the guy who runs the operation, manages the money, keeps the machine humming while Edison plays the genius. He's brilliant at it. But Insull is restless, and he's not content being somebody's secretary forever. So in 1892, he left the Edison orbit and took over a scrappy little outfit called Chicago Edison. And over the next few decades, he turns it into Commonwealth Edison, one of the great electric utilities in the world. And here's where Insull does something that, honestly, is one of the most consequential business insights of the entire 20th century. Most people at the time thought of electricity as a luxury good, a novelty, something rich people put in their parlors to show off. Insull looked at it completely differently. He said, no, electricity is a mass production business. It's not jewelry, it's flour. And here's the thing about a power plant. The thing that kept Insull up at night. A power plant is hideously expensive to build. And once it's built, it costs you almost the same whether it's running flat out or sitting there idle. So idle capacity, a generator spinning with nobody buying, that is the enemy. That is money on fire. Insull's genius was realizing that the way you win is to keep that machine running as close to full as humanly possible, all day, every day, by selling to as many different kinds of customers as you can. Let's think about that. Your house uses the most electricity in the evening. A factory uses it during the day. The streetcar system spikes at rush hour. So if you can sign up homes and factories and streetcars, their peaks and valleys fill in each other's gaps. And suddenly, your big, expensive generator is running smooth and full around the clock. The engineers call that your load factor. Insull was obsessed with load factor before anybody else even had a word for it. And the beautiful, virtuous logic of it is, the more diverse customers you add, the cheaper your cost per unit gets. So the lower you can set your price, which brings in more customers, which lowers your cost again. He invented the flywheel. Sell more, charge less, sell even more. To make it all work, he imported tools nobody in America was using. He brought over a demand meter from England, a device that measured not just how much electricity you used, but how hard you hit the system at your peak. And he built what we'd now recognize as a two-part rate. A charge for your peak demand, and a separate charge for your actual energy. Now, sit with that for a second. The demand charge, the two-part tariff. If you've ever read a modern utility tariff sheet, and if you're in this business, God help you, you have, you are reading Samuel Insull's handwriting. He invented the grammar we still use today. But here's the part that matters most for us. Here's the deal that we, as site selectors and economic developers, still live inside of every single day. Insull understood that the electricity business was naturally a monopoly. It makes no sense to run 5 competing sets of power lines down the same street. So in 1898, in a now famous speech to the industry, Insull stood up and proposed something that sounds insane coming from a monopolist. He said, "Regulate us. Give us an exclusive territory. Give us a guaranteed regulated rate of return. And in exchange, we accept government oversight and a legal obligation to serve. Anybody who wants power in our territory, we have to connect them." That bargain, exclusive monopoly, regulated return, obligation to serve, that is what we call the regulatory compact. And it is the foundation under Consumers Energy, under AEP, under Dominion, under Duke, under basically every investor-owned utility you will ever negotiate with. It's 120 some years old, and we'll come back to it in the nerd section because, oh yes, we have a nerd section, and because that compact is right now creaking under a weight Insull never imagined. So, how did it all end for good old Sam? Well, badly. Really, really badly. Because the same appetite that built the empire pyramided it into a tower of holding companies and leverage. Middle West utilities, this sprawling, interlocking thing. And when the Depression hit, the whole structure came down in 1932. Billions of dollars gone. Hundreds of thousands of small investors. The school teachers and the shopkeepers who'd been told utility stock was as safe as houses, wiped out. Insull fled the country. He got chased across Europe, extradited, hauled back, put on trial for fraud. And in 1934, a jury actually acquitted him. But he was finished. Broke in, and he died of a heart attack in a Paris subway station in 1938 with a few francs in his pocket. And the wreckage of his empire gave us the Public Utility Holding Company Act of 1935, a whole architecture of regulation built specifically to make sure nobody could ever do what Insull did again. The price of his innovation, paid in law. So, that's our guy, the man who invented the customer, the tariff, and the bargain, and got destroyed by his own faith that demand would never stop. Hold that thought. We'll be right back after the break. So here's the strange thing that happened after Insull. For most of the last 20 years or so, leading right up to about 2023, electricity demand in the United States was flat. Just flat. Year after year, basically no growth. And that wasn't because we stopped using gadgets. It's because every time we added a new device, we also got more efficient. LED bulbs, better appliances, tighter buildings. The new demand and the efficiency gains basically canceled each other out. The line on the chart just lay there, sleepy and predictable. And I cannot overstate how deeply that flatness got baked into everything we do. The entire apparatus, the way utilities file their long-range plans, the way rate cases work, the way the interconnection queue is structured, the assumptions in every model. All of it was built for a world where load grows maybe 0.5%, 1% a year. Nice and slow. Plenty of time to plan. The whole system was designed for a customer who shows up gradually and politely. And then artificial intelligence walked in the door, and the flat line ended. Not gradually, not politely, overnight. So let's talk about what's actually happening with real numbers, because the numbers are genuinely hard to believe. Right now, today, data centers consume somewhere around 4 to 5% of all the electricity in the United States. The Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, the serious, sober engineers research shop, projects that by 2030, that could climb to somewhere between 9 and 17% of all US electricity. Let me say that again. As much as 1 in 6 electrons in this entire country going to data centers by 2030. And here's the part that should make your hair stand up. EPRI's own estimate today is about 60% higher than the number they were giving just 2 years ago. The forecasts can't keep up with reality. They keep having to revise upward. Let's put it in capacity terms. One analysis from 451 Research, part of S&P Global, has data center grid demand going from about 62 gigawatts in 2025 to roughly 134 gigawatts by 2030. That's nearly tripling in 5 years. Another review found north of 100 gigawatts of data center demand lining up to come online between 2024 and 2035. And to give you a sense of that scale, that's something like 10 times the entire summer peak of New York City. We are talking about bolting 10 New Yorks onto the grid. But, and this is the pivot, this is the whole ball game for our profession. The constraint is not what it used to be. For decades, the question in citing a big power user was basically about cost. Where is power cheap? That was the game. But that's not the game anymore. The new constraint, the thing that actually kills deals, is getting connected at all. Bain & Company is reporting electric utility interconnection delays of up to 5 years. The transformers and the switchgear and the big equipment, lead times of 8 to 24 months, if you can get in line at all. You can have all the money in the world and a beautiful site, and it doesn't matter because the binding constraint is a queue and a supply chain. And it is wildly concentrated. Virginia, Loudoun County, Data Center Alley, already burns more than 25% of its entire state electricity supply on data centers. A quarter. And by 2030, you've got a whole cohort of states projected to cross into the 10, 15, 20% range. And I'll point out, because this is home for a lot of us, Indiana is squarely on that list now. Ohio, Iowa, and others. This is not a coastal curiosity anymore. It's in the Midwest. It's probably in your county. Now, here's the genuinely tricky part. The part that's making utility planners pull their hair out. And it ties straight back to Insull's obligation to serve. There is a flood of what people are politely calling speculative interconnection requests. Because it's cheap to file a request, developers will file for the same project in 3 different utility territories all at once, just to see who can move fastest. Or they'll file for a project that may never actually get built. So the queue gets stuffed with phantom load. And the utility, which has a legal obligation to plan to serve, genuinely cannot tell the real customers from the ghosts. AEP, American Electric Power, put a number on this that I think captures the whole insanity. They reported something like 190 gigawatts of load sitting in their raw interconnection queue, against only about 24 gigawatts of actual signed commitments. So roughly 85% of what's banging on the door might be vapor. How do you plan a $100 billion grid around that? You see the problem. So if you're a hyperscaler, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, and you need enormous amounts of power, and you need it to be firm, meaning on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain or shine, no exceptions, because an AI training run that loses power is a catastrophe, what do you do? Renewables are wonderful, but the sun goes down and the wind stops. And batteries to cover that gap at this scale get eye-wateringly expensive. So the tech giants have started reaching for the one source of always-on, carbon-free, industrial-scale power we know works: nuclear. And the deals that have come out of this are, frankly, some of the most striking images in the history of this industry. The headline one, 3 Mile Island. Yes, that 3 Mile Island. The site of the worst commercial nuclear accident in American history in 1979. The one that basically froze the US nuclear industry for a generation. The undamaged unit there is being brought back from the dead, rebranded the Crane Clean Energy Center under a 20-year power deal to feed Microsoft. Let that picture sit with you for a second. The monument to nuclear fear, resurrected to power artificial intelligence. If you wanted one single image for the price of innovation, it's hard to beat that one. And it's not alone. Amazon is tied up with Talon Energy to draw power off the nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, a roughly $20 billion investment in that state. You've got Oklo, this advanced reactor company with agreements for up to 12 gigawatts with Switch and another 500 megawatts with Equinix. Google's working with Kairos Power. Amazon's also backing X Energy. The small modular reactor, the SMR, has become the belle of the ball. But, and I have to put my sober hat on here because this is where I see a lot of breathless coverage get it wrong. Let's be real about timelines. As of right now, only one SMR design, NuScale's 77 megawatt module, has actually earned full design certification from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And that was back in early 2023. And in a cautionary tale you should tattoo on your arm, NuScale's flagship project, the one with actual committed utilities behind it out in the Mountain West, got canceled in 2023 because the costs blew out. First of a kind SMR capital costs are running somewhere around $6,000 to $10,000 per kilowatt, which is brutal. And the serious analysts, the folks at Omdia, at CBRE, they're pegging the mid-2030s as the earliest that nuclear meaningfully powers hyperscale data centers at scale. So here's my advice, and you can quote me. When someone pitches you a nuclear-powered megasite, your job is to separate the PowerPoint reactors from the real ones. A signed power purchase agreement and an actual fuel supply chain. That's real. A glossy rendering and a press release, that's a PowerPoint reactor. Know the difference, because your community will be making 20-year decisions on it. Now, this episode of Architects of Prosperity will not be as long as some of our others. We are going to go to break for those of you that are interested in the nerd section. For those of you that don't want to proceed into the nerd section, as always, I appreciate the heck out of you. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you learned something about this wild world of electricity that we are all absorbing right now. We'll be right back after the break. All right, nerds, you know what time it is. Pour yourself something, whether that be coffee or something stronger. This is the nerd section. And this is the part I actually think matters most, because this is where the history and the headlines collide into something you can use on Monday morning. And even though I just started this, hold on, let me take a sip. There we go. Go back to Insull's grand bargain, the regulatory compact. It rested on two quiet assumptions that nobody ever questioned, because for 100 years, they were just true. Assumption 1, load is shared broadly across lots and lots of customers. Assumption 2, it grows slowly and predictably. Those two assumptions are the ground the entire compact stands on. Now drop a single 300 megawatt customer onto that ground. Both assumptions shatter all at once. The load isn't shared broadly. It's one enormous customer. And it didn't arrive slowly. It landed all at once. So you get the question that is now being fought over in rate cases and at public service commissions all across this country, mostly with nobody watching. Who pays for the generation and the transmission lines and the substations that get built for one giant customer? Because if that customer leaves and tech strategies change fast, and the rest of us are left holding the bill for infrastructure built just for them, that's a disaster for every ratepayer in the territory. Now, of course, given how fast this is moving and how long the interconnection queues are that I've already explained, you might assume that somebody will just step into the shoes of that foregone customer's site and their demand. But the rest of us, until that's figured out, are left holding the bill. The answer that's emerging is a whole new species of rate design, the large load tariff. The special class of rules just for these enormous customers. And I want to walk you through the mechanics in plain English, because if you're doing data center or big industrial work, this is your new bread and butter. First mechanism, the minimum take, sometimes called a demand ratchet. Ohio's a good public example here. There was an order requiring large data centers to pay for at least 85% of the energy they subscribe for, whether or not they actually use it. You signed up for the capacity, you're paying for it. That stops a developer from reserving a mountain of power, forcing the utility to build for it, and then quietly using a fraction. It protects everybody else's bill. Second mechanism, a non-refundable administrative fee, just to file. Now, it sounds boring, but it's not. It's a filter. It's how you make the speculative, phantom, file it in 3 territories requests expensive, so that only the serious customers bother. You are using a fee to clean the ghosts out of the queue. And third, financial security, collateral, letters of credit, deposits, real money put up front to back the obligation to pay. The utility's saying, prove you can stand behind this commitment before we go pour concrete on your behalf. And the fourth mechanism, the one that gets the most heated, the exit fee. The formula for what you owe if you walk away before the cost recovery period is up. Because somebody has to be on the hook for that purpose-built infrastructure. And the whole point of the exit fee is to make sure it's you, the customer who caused it, and not a retiree in the same county whose only crime was having the same electric company. Now, here's the deep point. Step back and look at all 4 of those together. Minimum take, admin fee, collateral, exit fee. What are they, really? They are risk allocation instruments. For 100 years, under Insull's bargain, the utility, and through the utility, all of us, every ratepayer, absorbed the demand risk. That was the deal. The large load tariff is quietly, methodically shoving that risk back onto the hyperscaler. It is a fundamental rewrite of the most important bargain in the history of electricity, and it's happening in regulatory filings that almost nobody reads. And if you were with us for the Architects of Prosperity finale, you know exactly where I'm going. We ended that series on the 2024 Nobel Prize in Economics. And their great theme, the difference between extractive institutions and inclusive institutions. Whether a society builds rules that let a few extract value and leave, or rules that let prosperity spread and compound. A data center is the same question in 2026 megawatts. Built one way, it's an extractive enclave. It pulls down enormous amounts of power and water. It socializes its grid costs onto everybody else's bill. It employs maybe 50 people, and it leaves a county holding the infrastructure bag. Built another way, with the right tariff, it's an inclusive anchor. It funds the grid upgrades the whole region needed anyway. It stabilizes a load pocket. It pulls in a supply chain and workforce. And the thing that decides which one you get, extractive enclave or inclusive anchor, is the tariff design. That's it. The tariff design. That's the institutional choice from the Nobel, sitting right there in a rate schedule. The rules decide who prospers. They always have. Colbert knew it, Insull knew it, and now it's our turn to know it. So let me bring this all the way home to the work. What does the Electron War actually mean for a site selector, for an economic developer, for a community trying to land a project? Number 1, repeat after me. Power is the new dirt. The whole Fatal Flaw screen has flipped on its head. For my entire career, the first question was, is there a site? The land, the zoning, the topography. That's not the first question anymore. The first question is, can this site actually get electrons this decade? Land is everywhere. Deliverable power is not. Number 2, the diligence questions have completely changed. It used to be acreage and rail and water. Now I'm asking, what's your position in the interconnection queue? How much headroom is in the nearest substation? What are the utility's large load tariff terms? Because those terms might make or break the project economics. And is anyone willing to look at behind the meter, bring your own generation, get off the grid entirely solutions? Those are the questions that decide deals now. Number 3, and this one's for the communities and the EDOs especially. Do not just chase the announcement. I know the press conference is intoxicating. I know the ribbon cutting feels like winning, but you have got to model the net. A 300 megawatt load with an 85% minimum take and a stiff exit fee is a fundamentally different animal than a jobs-rich manufacturer that draws a tenth of the power and hires 10 times the people. Neither is automatically good or bad. I want to make that clear. I represent data centers, I represent manufacturers, and I represent communities. Neither is automatically good or bad. But you have to know which one you're actually getting. So here's my one-liner for your next strategy session. Know your tariff before you market your megasite. Let me repeat that because I kind of bungled it. Know your tariff before you market your megasite. Because if you don't understand the rules of the electron, you are negotiating a deal you actually can't see. And number 4, you longtime listeners will recognize this from our season finale of season 3 with Jim Plump, that titan of Jackson County, Indiana, who talked about the shield and the sword. Every one of these data center opportunities is, at bottom, a shield or sword decision. Is this a project you go grab with the sword because it's going to anchor your region for 40 years? Or is it one you hold up the shield against because it's going to drain your grid and leave you with the bill? That judgment, that's the human part. That's why, even in a world of 300 megawatt applications and gigawatt nuclear deals, site selectors are still, thank God, people too. So let me leave you where we started. Samuel Insull bet his life the demand for power would be infinite and that capacity would be the only thing that ever held us back. And for 100 years, the flat line on the chart made him look like a fool. But he wasn't a fool. He was just early. Demand did become effectively infinite. It just took artificial intelligence to prove it. The constraint came roaring back. And the people who allocate that constrained resource, the utilities, the regulators, and yes, us, the site selectors and the economic developers, we are the quiet architects of who gets to prosper in the next chapter. The price of innovation has always been paid in infrastructure. In 1720, it was paid in paper money and a Scottish con man named John Law. In 2026, it's being paid in a transformer with a 3-year lead time and a tariff that almost nobody has read all the way through. Same story, new fuel. If this one made you think, do me a favor and send it to one person in your network who needs to hear power is the new dirt before their next deal. It really helps more than you know. Until then, I'm Devin Hillsdon-Smith. And remember, site selectors are people too. Take care of yourselves out there. See ya.
Just a heads up, views expressed in this podcast are solely my own and are not attributable to any employers, whether past or present. Thank you.